Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here on this Thursday. We are a day away from the weekend. I'm so ready. A lot of today's episode is going to be going through the Jason Billingsley press conference. He was arrested without incident last night. Thank goodness. He is off the streets and in custody. And then we're going to do a little bit of Suzanne Morphew updates. First, I want to thank everybody for your donations and also everybody who's buying merch. I really appreciate you guys. You can buy merch at the store right now. I've got a sale going on, 10% off everything. I plan on working on some new designs this weekend because I love working on designs. Not that I need anything else in that store, but things come to my head and I just get on there and have fun with it. So planning on doing some more Halloween shirts, some fall shirts, and also some Christmas shirts. So you can get 10% off with code Sherlock at checkout. And I will be refunding everybody who bought those tumblers. I have all of your information. So I'm going to be processing those refunds probably tomorrow. I'm going to give them one more day to let me know if they can get me a date of when those are going to be back in stock. If not, expect your refund back into whatever account you paid with. There's not a ton of things I'm great at, right? But I'm really, really good at scoring awesome seats when there's a pre-sale. These fingers are like butter on that phone. I can just go through and I got me some killer seats for me and the girls for Stevie Nicks in February, 5 minutes from my house, y'all. Heaven on earth. Can't wait. Wish it were February already. So the music fact of the day is going to be about the one and only Stevie Nicks, my spirit animal. She explained that she had written the song The Edge of 17 in 1980 after reading a fun fact on an airplane menu. It said the white-winged dove sings a song that sounds like she's singing ooh, ooh, ooh. But here's the kicker. Stevie Nicks did not hear a white-winged dove sing until 2020. She put a tweet out where she had a video of the white-winged dove singing. We have those around here. You hear them a lot in the morning and at night. That was a huge hit of hers and she had never heard it. All right, so the big news of the day is that Jason Billingsley was caught last night around 11 p.m. at a train station without incident. He is in custody. This was in Prince George County. Officials announced his arrest at 12:30 this morning. This man should have never been on the streets. And that was the topic of a lot of reporters' questions towards law enforcement was, how is this guy on the street? You look at since October, he has severely injured and attacked two people. A 5-year-old went to the hospital due to the fire he set in their townhome. And then poor Pava was killed. He literally had years left on his sentence. But yet this good behavior, we're going to explain how they do that here in a minute. They did go through that at the press conference. Richard Worley said they're going to put this violent repeat offender back in jail where he belongs. And he said, let's all work together to make sure he stays there. I think y'all are going to have to change your laws up there in Baltimore. I love the area. It's beautiful, but man, it's a scary thought. You're letting somebody with a first-degree sex assault conviction out for early release for good behavior. They're still processing evidence to determine what exactly happened with Pava. Jason was known to the two adult victims in the attack at the townhomes where he sexually assaulted the woman. Both of them were severely injured. And then the 5-year-old, as we know, didn't have any physical injuries other than being treated for smoke inhalation. But I thought it was interesting. He did know them. There was no forced entry into Pava's apartment building. They don't know if there's any connections between Pava and Jason. They're still looking into that. I want to run through this press conference that they had today. It was a long one. I was surprised it went that long. A lot of great questions from the media that was there covering that. Richard Worley said they're going to put this violent repeat offender back in jail where he belongs. And he said, let's all work together to make sure he stays there. Unfortunately, it's going to take legislature to change their laws in the state of Maryland about how they allow violent offenders to get out for good behavior. It shouldn't happen. What's crazy is you hear of people getting much longer prison sentences for nonviolent crimes and having to serve more time than this man did on his second stay in prison, by the way, for violent attacks. They're still processing evidence to determine exactly what happened with Pava. Jason, he actually worked there in that building where he sexually assaulted a woman, critically injured her and another person there. As far as Pava, there was no forced entry into her apartment building. They don't know if there's any kind of a connection between her and Jason at the moment. They're still looking into that. He tied up both adults in the basement and sexually assaulted the woman. He poured gasoline into the room, lit the fire, and got out of there. If you're on YouTube, I have pictures up. The Daily Mail was able to get exclusive pictures of the damage in that townhome. They're lucky they got out, as well as that 5-year-old. They said through witness testimony and surveillance, they were able to identify Jason as the suspect in that townhome attack. An arrest warrant was issued within hours of the attack, and it was issued on September 20th, which would have been last Wednesday. They brought in U.S. Marshals, and a flyer was given to every officer in the Baltimore Police Department. They started tracking his phone, looking through his financial transactions, social media accounts, watching known addresses he had been going to, speaking to multiple witnesses, and listening to previous jail calls he had placed when he was in custody. They were able to get within the same vicinity as Jason, but they said he was able to elude them. They had a press conference scheduled for the other day, I believe it was Tuesday, regarding Pava, but they delayed it because they said they were within 80 meters from Jason. They started tracking him on the 20th up until his capture last night. They knew the risk of going public with his information would be that he would go underground, which he did. As soon as they had the news conference earlier this week, he left the location he was at, and later on, investigators executed a search warrant at that residence. The state's attorney said all cases go before a grand jury, and when and if they return an indictment, his office will go for life without the possibility of parole. So at this point, they turned it over to the media, and I think the media asked questions for 20 solid minutes. Jason was being tracked and was still able to commit a violent act. How? Worley said as soon as they realized there was a public safety issue, they had the press conference. This was after Pava's murder. Had Jason not known the 2 adult victims and this was a random act, they would have immediately warned the public that Jason was on the loose committing random acts of violence against people he didn't know. Worley said they pretty much know how and why he went into that couple's townhouse before he assaulted them. He said they know why he committed those acts as well. He worked there and was familiar with these victims. He said he wouldn't say much more because he doesn't want to talk bad about victims, but said Jason was at the townhome for a reason. And at that point, everybody investigating the crime against the couple and the 5-year-old decided they didn't think he was committing random acts of violence at that point, that it was targeted against this couple specifically. Investigators knew he had been out of prison since October of last year, but they said he had not been connected to any incidents they know of, but they are looking at cases that have gone unsolved since his release in October of 2022, just to see if there could be any connection with him. The next question, what would your response be should citizens ask if they can trust the Baltimore Police Department? He said, if we made a mistake, I would tell you we made a mistake. We made the decision we make every time based on the facts and circumstances we have. Once we realized he had randomly attacked Pava, we still don't know the connection there. We put the flyer out. As we thought, as soon as he saw the flyer, he tried to elude capture and turned off all the devices they had been using to track him up to that point. Mayor Brandon Scott chimed in saying that their work is done each and every day as far as the police department goes. Their work is what got him put in prison the first time around. He said residents instead should be questioning why was he let out of prison and how that happened. He said that's not on the police department. They're the ones out here arresting murderers, taking record numbers of guns off the street. He said, we have a system we have to deal with. Police didn't decide to let this sociopath back on the streets of Baltimore. They got information about where Jason might be going. Prince George County SWAT showed up, and when Jason showed his face, he was arrested without incident. He said he can't comment on anything that was said in the interview with Jason or if they recovered a weapon on him. As we know, his mom said that he had a gun, and then police also confirmed later that he had stolen a gun. When asked in hindsight if they should have put a picture of Jason out after the first attack on the couple, Worley said, yeah, hindsight is 2020. If they had known he was going to murder someone, they would have put the flyer out, but they had no indication that he was committing random acts since the first attack was targeted. He said Jason worked in the apartment and was allowed inside that couple's unit. They had no reason to think he was committing random acts, but had they known, the flyer would have come out on September 20th as soon as they got the arrest warrant, which they did. They had an arrest warrant for the attack on the couple the whole time, including now we know on Friday is when they think that Pava was murdered. He's asked if they've gotten information that there is another dead person in a vacant home, and Worley said that's the first he's hearing of that. The reporter says, I understand the difficulty of not being sure someone committed a crime and not wanting to alert the suspect. But on the presser from Tuesday, you were asked point blank if there were other crimes, and you nor the mayor answered that, even though Jason had an arrest warrant out for him due to the attack on the couples. Why did you refuse to acknowledge and discuss that incident? Worley says because at that time they were tracking him. The reporter said, that's not what I'm asking. Once you had the press conference saying you were looking for him for the murder in Mount Vernon, why didn't you acknowledge the other incident where there was a warrant out for a week already? Worley said because there were two victims from the townhomes. One of those victims was still in the hospital. One was at their location, and they had to get them protection. They didn't know if Jason was going to try and, he says, apprehend the couple. Plus, once he saw the homicide presser, they just did not know what he was going to do. They knew a few places he may go, and they were tracking him, which is why that presser was actually delayed 30 minutes earlier in the week. A question that was asked, what changed between the presser on Tuesday and yesterday when you announced he was wanted in connection with both? Worley said once they realized and confirmed Jason was the suspect in both cases, that they knew he was fleeing and had to get his information out as soon as possible. He said when it's targeted and then changes to random, we don't know what he's going to do. Once they had the press conference and he saw it, they said obviously they had no clue whether or not he was going to watch that press conference. Plus, once they take him into custody, he said the investigation continues. In speaking to him about the townhomes attacks, they didn't want to give out any details they would know about the case. Worley said when it's targeted and then it changes to random, we don't know what he's going to do. And then once they had that press conference on Tuesday and say, Jason's out there, they didn't know that he was going to watch that press conference. Plus, he said once we take him into custody, the investigation continues in speaking to him about the townhome attacks without giving up any details they know about the case. He said all those things were taken into consideration as to why they did not answer that question on Tuesday. He was already wanted. He is asked, do you think something should change? Should violent offenders not be given a chance to be let out? The mayor steps up and says, I think every case is different, but if you look at the facts of his first case, that put him in prison. The mayor of Baltimore, whose name is Brandon Scott, got up to the microphone to answer this question. He said, I think every case is different, but if you look at the facts of Jason's first case that put him in prison, he should not have been out on the streets. Worley was asked, was he cooperative and did he give any information after his arrest? Worley said that he was cooperative because he was surrounded by a SWAT team. He said he won't release anything about the interview Jason had with detectives once he was taken back to the police station. Another question, are you looking into the case to see if there were any deals from 2015 and should there be reform to good time credits? Ivan Bates said that they immediately pulled his file once he was identified and noticed that a plea was given in that case, and the plea was a little bit below guidelines. He said the prosecutor was from another administration and is no longer there. The law was passed in 2016 saying if you rape or sexually assault someone younger than 16, you are not eligible for the credits to get out early. Of course, what we're all thinking, he said that legislature may want to look at this and decide if someone who is in for first-degree rape is eligible for early release credit. He said if that was the law in 2013 when he was first arrested, then Jason would not have been eligible for parole. He was asked, was Jason armed? And he answered, when he was surrounded by SWAT, he got the message he may want to give up. They were waiting for him. He said they won't release any information about whether or not a weapon was recovered on him because that is evidence. Another question, why not give the townhome victims protection before the press conference on Tuesday? Worley said one was in the hospital and they had no indication that Jason would go back after them. The other victim did not live in the city. Once they put it out, Jason could have gone back and tried to harm them and finish what he didn't finish on the day of the attack. He said ultimately their goal was to protect the couple that had been attacked by him. Another question, there was a warrant out from Baltimore County about a gun, and they wonder if that is connected to Jason. Worley said they knew he had stolen a gun, and that was another reason they needed to put this flyer out. Jason had made statements that he was dangerous and would be hard to take into custody. He is charged with gun theft as well, by the way. When asked where he made those statements, Worley said he's a psychopath and that Jason made those statements to the person that he actually stole the gun from. Another question, any details of evidence that led to the connection to Jason and Pava? Worley said the same detective happened to be on both scenes of the townhome and Pava's case and was able to identify Jason quickly as the suspect in both of those attacks. Another question, I'm confused about the answer about why you waited to announce the attacks at the townhomes, and you said you wanted to be certain about the suspect. You said you knew at the time of the last presser he was involved in the townhomes and Pava's murder. When were you sure Jason was the person? He said probably not long before that presser. All they had was one detective saying that it was the same person for both attacks. So they had to confirm through other means of evidence to tie him to Pava's murder, as well as those attacks at the townhomes. They knew he did the attacks at the townhomes, but they had to tie those two cases together to him. He said releasing information about the townhomes would not have helped them at that time. They didn't want to let on that they knew he committed the assaults at those townhomes because they still needed to interview him for that. And he may just say, I didn't do it. So we don't want to give him any indication of what evidence they had. The murder warrant alone was going to cause him to flee. Another question, why was he on the streets? What was the terms of his release and eventual supervision? So the state's attorney for Baltimore City, Ivan Bates, gets up to answer this one. And he said in June of 2013, he was charged with a crime. It took until 2015 for him to go to court. He pled guilty to a sex offense in the first degree. And then in Maryland, you have sentencing guidelines. And the guidelines for that offense are 15 to 25 years. He got 30 years and suspended all but 14 years, meaning he would have been incarcerated for 14 years. However, in Maryland, you get diminution credits, which is 30 days of good time for every month you're in custody and you're not messing up. He didn't need to be paroled, and he did less than 2/3 of his sentence, and that's what the law allows currently. He said it's more of a systematic failure. The plea bargain was below guidelines, but again, he mentions this was under a different administration. He says, I don't know all the issues with this particular case. The victim may not want to testify. You may not have DNA on your side. There are a number of different issues. He said, I wasn't a prosecutor, so we don't have that information. But what we do have is the all but 14 years suspended, and they know the judge was reluctant to accept that plea bargain. He said, I think now that we see how these good behavior credits work, I think the prosecutor would say we got a dangerous individual off the streets for a few years, but we need to take a look at the system that allows these credits to someone like Jason with those kind of charges. Another question, was a judge the one who authorized his release? The answer, it was the state's attorney's office that made the offer, and the court accepted that offer. So it was everyone involved on that side. Another question, all cases since his release are now under review. Is there any evidence he's been connected to any other crimes besides these two that we're talking about? Worley said right now there's no indication that he's done anything other than these two since his release. But he also said if anybody out there is a victim of Jason and didn't report it, they need them to reach out to investigators now. Another question, this was directed to the state's attorney and the mayor. Going back to the good time credit, we know the parole board denied him twice. Should that have been a red flag, and should that be a reason the law has changed as a warning? The parole board said he shouldn't have been released, and yet he still gets out. Ivan Bates says legislature changed the laws in 2016 that say if you are convicted of a sex act in the first degree to someone 16 years old or younger, you don't qualify for those good behavior credits. I would love to see that law looked at again in terms of all sex crimes. I'm not in legislature, but I think it helps to keep the public safer. Of course it does. We literally have seen evidence of that this week with 4 people, 3 of which injured, 1 of which brutally murdered. He says you can look at his prior history. He is a repeat violent offender, but he's going to get those good behavior credits because that is the law. We need to see what we can learn from this and see how the credits work and how it's letting some individuals back on the streets quicker than they should be. Mayor Brandon Scott says when you rape someone, you should never be let out of prison early. Couldn't agree more, 100%. Question for Worley. If you were tracking him so closely for 6 days, how was he not arrested? Worley said they never got close enough. They got 88 meters from him, which is about roughly 300 feet or the size of a football field. That was the reason the press conference was delayed for 30 minutes on Tuesday, because they knew where he was at. They were looking for him and he just disappeared. They weren't able to track him. And as soon as the presser happened on Tuesday, the devices they were using to track him were turned off and he started using other means to communicate with people. Another question. Can you drill down the sequence of events on Monday when he murdered Pava? Worley said Monday is when they discovered her at the address. They think she was actually murdered on Friday night. She wasn't found, though, until she was reported missing on Monday. Just a little quick note here. She was seen by friends, talked to friends, hung out with friends at Artscape, which is a 3-day art festival in the city. Family and friends reportedly tried to contact her repeatedly over the weekend. A friend told the Daily Beast she is not the kind of person to just go missing or go silent. You always get a hold of her if you need her. The reporter asks again about a sequence of events for Friday, and the mayor gets up to the mic and says, "You weren't here the other day, but we're not going to do that. This is an open investigation, and at the request of the family, we aren't sharing those details because the reality is she was murdered by Jason. It will all come out, but the family has asked we not share those details, and we're going to ask that you guys respect that wish." Another question. When he was arrested last night, was it his cell phone that gave him away? How were you able to determine he was at the train station? Worley said not going into that because it could put people in jeopardy. A question for the state attorney. What were the conditions for his release? He said to comply and follow the law and compliance with being on the sex offender registry and to see his parole and or probation agent, not go around victims from that first case in 2013, not be around guns or felons. He was on parole and probation. Worley jumps in and adds that another reason they held off on staying in the townhomes were related to Pava is because he was compliant with their sex offender registry. They knew he was supposed to show up on Monday to check in with their sex offender unit, and he didn't show. The next question. What do you say to the families of victims whose cases haven't had the media attention this has had? He said, our homicide unit investigates these cases as if it were their own family. The same day as Pava's murder, a 15-year-old named Rashid Maxwell was shot and killed. They're investigating that case as diligently as they are investigating these two cases. And the evidence in this case just came quicker than with his case. He said they also have over 200 homicide victims in the city this year alone. They work every day to solve every murder. The mayor jumps in and said, we talked about Rashid at the presser. Nobody asked about him. They work the cases the same way. I see the effect that investigating these cases has on them. Tyree Nickerson is a neighbor in the townhomes and said Jason left the couple to die. He said, I feel terrible for what they experienced. She is such a beautiful woman, friendly and vibrant, and he tormented and violated her. He went on to say he got in the house, he tied the guy up, assaulted the girl in front of him, and after he finished assaulting the girl, he just started dousing the room with gasoline and lit it on fire. Everyone is horrified. We want to know what he said to get in there in case he tries it again. Now we know this is a little bit older. This was from yesterday. Now we know that he was led into that townhome, it seems. You can't tie two people up with just a knife. He wanted to know if perhaps he had a gun that day. He said it doesn't make any sense that you could subdue two people with a knife. Back in 2013, he posed as a good Samaritan before attacking a woman, which landed him in prison where he served only 9 years of a 30-year sentence. He saw a woman who was in distress sitting on the street after an argument with her boyfriend, and he introduced himself and offered her a place to stay for the night. When they got to the residence that he took her to, they had to crawl through an unlocked window, and Jason said the reason they had to do that is because he lost his keys. They sat on the bed and talked, and he told her that he wanted to be intimate with her. She said she wanted to leave, and so Jason struck her in the face and began to choke her, telling her that she would do what he said or he would shoot her. She didn't see a gun, but he did produce a knife during the attack. After he assaulted her, he stole $53 and told her that his aunt is a police officer and she better not tell anyone about the attack because nobody would believe her. The victim had bruises to her neck, lips, and left eye. She identified Jason from a photo lineup. Jason was charged in that crime with first-degree rape, false imprisonment, and assault. As we know, 16 years was suspended, and he was on 5 years of supervised release. His original release date, get this, guys, 20 years from now, in 2043. Jason was arrested for his very first assault back in 2009 when he was 18. Again, in 2011, he was arrested for assault and served 2 years in prison. So the 2013 attack was his second stay in prison. Third time's a charm. Let's hope he never gets out. The Daily Beast talked to people who knew Pava. She seems like such an innovative, cool woman. One mentor of Pava's says when you're known by your first name in a city, that says something. When you said Pava, everybody knew you were talking about her and everybody loved her. She was full of light, and when she was around, you felt her energy. An advisor of hers said Pava's goal was to help as many people as she could, to be a champion for those who were forgotten and not given the chances they deserved. She believed in supporting entrepreneurs, especially ones from underrepresented communities. She also raised $8 million in funding for her company, which is EcoMap Technologies. Her dad, Frank, posted on Facebook she was driven, creative, hardworking, and relentless in her efforts. With her wonderful team at EcoMap Technologies, Pava made an impact in every endeavor she undertook and on every life she touched. She will be forever missed as a daughter, sister, granddaughter, niece, cousin, and loyal friend. Man, Baltimore's got some work to do. They need to get these laws changed to protect their citizens. I'm curious to see more come from the investigation with Pava, especially how he was able to get into that building. There was no signs of forced entry. But ultimately, just glad he's off the streets. And I'm sure the people of Baltimore can breathe a little bit easier tonight because that guy was relentless and super dangerous. And it's just terrifying to think that there are many more just like him out walking among us. Always keep your eyes open, people. Moving on to Suzanne Morphew. The coroner who was called at the scene to collect the remains said that Suzanne's bones were found in a remote, dry desert field of sagebrush and natural grasses. It appeared her remains were buried in a shallow grave before being scattered. Her remains were located about 30 to 40 minutes from her home. Her sister says that they were informed yesterday of the discovery, saying, "This is a miracle. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Colorado is a vast and rugged place, and we have prayed that God would put light on where she is. We've been praying, and here we are today. It's a day of great sadness, but a day of celebration. This is just a small little snippet. A lot more will be revealed in time. We will be patient and trust the process." She said Barry was notified first of the discovery because he is her next of kin. Barry's attorney's given a statement about the remains of Suzanne being found. It says Barry is with his daughters and they are all struggling with immense shock and grief after learning today that their mother and wife, whom they deeply loved, was found deceased. They had faith that their wife and mom would walk back into their lives again. This news is heartbreaking. Neither the DA nor the authorities notified Mallory and Macy Morphew about the recovery of their mom. From what we know, Barry is as innocent as he was from day one. DA Stanley and law enforcement got it wrong. We hope authorities will quickly admit their wrongful prosecution of Barry, an innocent man, and treat the Morphews like the victims they are and charge the person or persons responsible for Suzanne's killing. The Morphews would appreciate their privacy during this deeply emotional and personal time. Her brother also released a statement. The family would like to thank all involved for the discovery of our sister, Suzanne. Over the last 3 years, countless hours have been spent looking for Suzanne by a determined group who have never given up hope that she would be found. The memories of her gentle spirit and wonderful smile have been a constant presence since her disappearance to all who knew and loved her. We want to thank the sheriff, his staff, the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, the FBI, and the hundreds of volunteers who never gave up. Fate may have played a key role in finding her, but it does not negate the resolute commitment of those involved. We would also like to thank the citizens who have been subjected to this unimaginable saga for the support and prayers. We look forward to finding long-awaited justice for Suzanne and the successful prosecution of those involved in her disappearance. Really quick note on the Crystal Rogers case. Her mother has filed a petition for emergency custody of Crystal and Brooks' son after Brooks was arrested yesterday for Crystal's murder. He was actually arrested at a work site. If you're on YouTube, I have some photos up of that now. Crystal's son was a toddler when she went missing. Within minutes of Brooks being arrested, Crystal's mom and her daughter were both at the courthouse and seen inside the circuit clerk's office, and they were flanked by Nelson County Sheriff's deputies. Crystal's mom had lost all visitation rights and had no communication with the child. She told WHAS 11 News back in 2021, "One day that baby is going to be old enough to come and see me, and he's going to know everything I've done to fight for him." Sources confirmed to WHAS 11 that the petition had been denied for now, but there is a hearing scheduled. It just said for later in the week, so either today or tomorrow, which could grant her emergency custody of Crystal's son. So that's it for today. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. We'll see you soon.